Values can be passed as arguments to a function in two different ways, by value or by reference. Let's take a look at the difference. The most common way is to pass arguments by value. If you want to capture any changes that the function makes to the value of the argument, you need to assign the function's return value to a new variable or reassign it to the existing one. Let's experiment by creating a simple function to double a number. I'm going to start off by defining a number. Initialize that at 2. Then we need to create our function that will pass by value. So the function keyword, then the name of the function, I'll call it double it, and then the argument that we're going to pass to the function. I'm deliberately going to use the same name as the original variable that I've initialized on line 2. So I'm going to use number. And I've done that because I want to demonstrate that functions act rather like a black box shielded from the rest of the script. Inside here we need to have a return value, and it will be number, the argument that has been passed to the function, times equals 2. And then we can test our function. We'll store the return value as doubled, then use the double it function and pass it our variable called number. Then we need to display the result. We'll have a single quoted string because I want to distinguish between the two results. Doubled is, then the actual value of doubled, and a line break. Then we'll do the same with number. So if we save that and load it into a browser, we see that the return value, doubled, is 4, but number, the variable, is still 2. This is because we passed by value. When you do that, the PHP engine makes a copy of the value and it works on the copy. As a result, the original value stored in the variable remains unchanged, and the changes made to number inside the function have no effect on this same name variable outside the function. The function creates its own environment or scope that's separate from the rest of the script. Another point to note about passing by value is you can pass it an ordinary value rather than a variable. So on line 9, instead of number, we'll pass it 8, a literal number, save that and refresh, and the return value is 16. That's the doubled value. So that's passing by value. Let's take a look now at passing by reference. And what I'm going to do is to comment out the function definition on lines 5 to 7. That's because you can't redefine a function in the same script. So we'll now pass by reference. And we'll call the function the same name, double it. And to pass by reference, you need to precede the argument by an ampersand. So ampersand, and I'm going to use a different variable this time for the argument. I'm going to call it num. And we don't need to return a value because we're passing a reference to the actual variable that we're passing into the function. So in other words, it's working on the variable directly. So we simply have num times equals 2. And then on line 14, I'll change that from the literal 8 to number, our variable, save that, and then reload this page in the browser. Nothing is displayed for doubled, but number, the variable itself, has now been changed to 4. It's no longer 2. So passing by reference changes the value of the original variable. An important thing to note is that this ampersand is only in the definition of the function. You don't use it when you call the function itself. So let's see what the value of doubled is now that we're passing by reference. We can use var underscore dump to inspect the contents of a variable. So we pass it doubled and then save and reload, and var dump is simply null. It's nothing at all. Nothing has been returned by the double it function. Now let's try using this function with an ordinary number. We'll pass it 8 again, save and refresh this page in the browser, and we now get a fatal error, and it tells us that only variables can be passed by reference. And that makes a lot of sense because you can't really change the value of 8. 8 is always 8. So we've looked at two ways that functions handle values passed to them as arguments. Most functions take arguments that are passed by value. They make a copy of the value and work on the copy, so the original value remains unchanged unless you reassign the function's return value to the same variable. However, when an argument is passed by reference, the function changes the value of the variable, and to create this type of function, you precede the argument with an ampersand in the function definition. There's no need for this type of function to return a value because any changes made by the function affect the original value. However, remember that passing by reference means you can't pass a literal value such as a number or a string to the function. Some functions require what's known as a callback function to be passed to them as an argument. A callback is a user-defined function that manipulates the data and then passes it back to the main function. Because a callback is normally used only once, it's a good opportunity to use an anonymous function. Let's see how to do that when creating a user-defined sort for an array. The PHP block at the top of the page defines an array called friends. It's actually an array of arrays because each element is an associative array with the elements first and last. This is what's known as a multidimensional array. Then on line 12, the friends array is passed to the PHP sort function. This sorts an array in ascending order, and it takes its argument by reference, so this will automatically sort the friends array. We don't need to capture any result. Then if we scroll down, on line 25, a for each loop goes through the friends array. Each element is treated as friend, and then we display it, but because each array element is also an array, we need to convert it into a string. We do that using the built-in PHP implode function. The first argument to implode is what you want to insert between each array element. This is a string with a single space, and the second argument is the array that you want to deal with. So we're going through each one, and this will join first and last with a space between them. So if we load this page into a browser, it's sorted the array, but it's only used the first names. The last names are in random order. So what we need to do is to create a user-defined sort, and we can do that with the PHP usort function. Let's take a look at the definition of the usort function in the online documentation. So the usort function sorts an array by values using a user-defined comparison function. And if we look at the description, the first argument to usort is an array. It's preceded by an ampersand, so that means that it's being passed by reference. It'll affect the array itself. And the second argument is callable, value compare func. Callable means that it's going to be a function. So let's scroll down and see what this function needs to do. And it describes it here. It says that the comparison function must return an integer less than, equal to, or greater than 0 if the first argument is considered to be respectively less than, equal to, or greater than the second. And it takes two arguments. And these are elements from the array that you want to sort. So let's get back to the editing program. So instead of using sort on line 12, we'll change that to usort. The first argument is still friends, and the second argument needs to be our callback. And rather than define the comparison function elsewhere and pass the name of the function as the second argument to usort, I'm going to use an anonymous function. If you used anonymous functions in JavaScript, the syntax will be familiar. It's exactly the same as an ordinary function, but it doesn't have a name. So we need the function keyword, and then the two arguments that we need to pass to it. These will be the array elements that we're going to compare, so A and B. Then we need a pair of curly braces for the body of the function, and we need to return a value. PHP 7 has a new operator called the spaceship operator that's designed just for this purpose. It compares two values and returns -1, 0 or 1, depending on whether one is less than the other, they're equal, or one is more than the other. So we'll compare A and the last element, and the spaceship operator is a less than sign, equals, and greater than. And the one that we need to compare it with is B and the last element. So if the last element of A is less than the last element of B, this will return -1. If they're both equal, it will return 0. And if the one on the left-hand side is greater than the one on the right-hand side, it will return +1. Now this works only in PHP 7, so you won't be able to test this if you're running PHP 5. I'll show you in a moment how you can handle this in PHP 5. But let's just save that and then reload in the browser. And this time the array has been sorted according to the last name. So we've gone from black to brown to green to white. But if we look at John Black and Diana Black, well, the last names are in the right order, but the first names are not in the right order. That's no problem. The spaceship operator is capable of comparing arrays. So let's go back to our editing program, and here, instead of just comparing the last element of A with the last element of B, we'll create an array. So we need a square bracket in there, and the second element of our array will be A first. In that closing square bracket, and the same here, we're going to be creating an array. So in there, comma, and B first. So if we save that, go back to the browser, this time Diana Black, John Black, Harry Brown, Hillary Brown, Amanda Green, Paul Green, Jane White, Jim White. Everything is sorted perfectly. So this works just exactly as we want it, but it only works in PHP 7. What if you're using an older version of PHP? Well, let's go back to the editing program, and this has a user-defined function here. It needs to use a conditional statement, if, else if, and else, and it returns the correct values, -1, 1, or 0. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this video using an anonymous function as a callback to sort an array in a user-defined manner. A callback is a function that's passed as an argument to another function to manipulate data on behalf of the main function. Anonymous functions have been part of PHP since version 5.3, so you should be able to use them on any PHP server unless it's running a really old, unsupported version. We also saw how to use the PHP 7 spaceship operator. That's this operator here on line 13. It consists of a less than, equals, and greater than symbol. It compares two values and returns -1 if the first value is less than the second, 0 if they're both the same, and 1 if the first value is greater. Why is it called the spaceship operator? Well, if you use your imagination, I suppose it does look rather like a crude rocket, and it's a lot easier to say than the less than, equal to, or greater than operator. Modern PHP makes extensive use of objects and classes, so your knowledge of the language is incomplete without understanding the basics of what they are and what they do. So what are objects? An object is a data type that can store and manipulate values. You create an object from a class, which defines what an object can do. A class is basically a collection of related functions and values packaged as a single unit that acts as a blueprint for creating new objects. PHP has many built-in classes, such as the DateTime class for working with dates and time, and MySQLi for connecting to a MySQL database. You can also create your own custom classes or use third-party frameworks such as WordPress or Laravel to extend the functionality of PHP. We won't be building custom classes in this course, but it's important to know how to use classes and objects. All classes have methods. Most also have properties. An object can use methods defined by its class to perform predefined tasks. A method is exactly the same as a function. It's just given a different name when talking about objects and classes. Values stored by an object are referred to as the object's properties. You can think of a property as being the same as a variable, except it applies to an object. If all that sounds a bit abstract, let's use a car as an example of an object. An important property of any car is its color. For example, you might have a red car, or it could be blue. Other important properties are the make of a car and the number of miles on the clock. All cars share similar properties, but each car is unique. Similarly, each object that you create from a PHP class is unique. Methods dictate what an object can do. In the case of a car, accelerate is a useful method. Although all cars can accelerate, they operate independently of each other. In programming terms, you create an instance of a class or instantiate an object. This simply involves using the class's constructor method with the new operator and storing the object in a variable. The constructor method has the same name as the class, and it often accepts one or more arguments to initialize the object's properties. In our very simple example, we're passing red as the argument to the constructor, and we get a red car. You can create more than one object from the same class, so this creates another car, and this time it's blue. You access an object's properties using the arrow operator, which consists of a hyphen and a greater than symbol. Just append the arrow operator to the variable that contains the object, followed by the name of the property. The arrow operator is also used to call an object's methods. So if car objects have stop and accelerate methods, you can make car1 stop, while car2 accelerates away. Those are the basics of working with objects and classes. In the next video, we'll look at a practical example.